Hello and welcome to the DD Hangout show. Today we're going to talk about network management, and Rich and Mark, our hosts, will share their experience on how to use the frustration, not the control. Based on the East Coast of the US, Rich Schofield is Business Development Director for Networking at Dimension Data Global. And also with us today is Mark Holmes, BDM for Networking Managed Services in Europe. Hello, guys. Before we get started, I just want to mention to everybody that if you have any comments or questions, please share them on the Google Plus event page or simply tweet them using the hashtag DDHangout. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you're catching the recording of this event, still, please share your feedback and we'll get back to you. Rich, Mark, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Celine. How you doing, Mark?
Yeah, pretty good, Rich. How's the weather over there? We've had a bit of rain over this way for a while.
It looks a little bit like England. It's raining like heck here. Yeah.
But green and beautiful.
Yeah. So Mark, you being based in Europe, and me being based here, and I think anybody who can see us actually on the Google Hangout can tell just by taking a quick look at us. We've been around the business for a while.
That's right.
Got plenty of gray hair here, and I know we've seen a lot of changes and transitions in how networks are managed. I mean, things used to be so much easier than they are today.
Oh, that's right, Rich. I mean, yeah. If you look backwards, I mean, take one simple thing. There's no convergence, right? A network carried data traffic, a voice network carried voice traffic, video was on a video network. So there's no convergence. So things are pretty much simpler back then, right, for a network management perspective.
100%. And I remember when things were as easy as swapping out a MUX or a modem, and then even when we started with the mid to late 80s, we started with LAN WAN equipment. You still kind of, like you said, we just had one vendor. A lot of the management was really kind of up-down type stuff. Didn't take a lot of work. You had tools from the single vendors you had, and it was pretty easy. I don't know if I want to say easy, but certainly a lot easier than it is today.
It was more simple, right? Yeah, you're right. It was up, it was down, the link was up, the link was down, and kind of if the box was there and the green lights were on, then it was kind of working, right?
100%.
Right. It was a bit simpler.
But you mentioned something a second ago related to converged infrastructures, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's I would be challenged to think of a more impactful, complex factor for today's network management than that. Wouldn't you agree?
I would think so, yeah, because the interoperability of these different things working together. And Rich, don't forget, in the old days, it was all single vendor, right? So you had a vendor doing this, a vendor doing that. So we didn't have this multi-vendor situation. So today, your bandwidth may be on one particular vendor's box, performance optimization on another, you've got load balancing. The complexity today is much more than it was back then.
Mm-hmm. Even the quality of service bits, right? I mean, that certainly has made complex even the configuration of a single vendor's equipment, right? Because it's got to be able to identify the different traffic types, the different traffic sources, and then apply the correct rules, and then just managing all that, making sure that you're getting what you expect to get on an ongoing basis becomes very difficult, don't you think?
Yeah, and Rich, taking it another level, right? The quality of service also is impacted by things like firewalls. So these days, the traffic doesn't just get shipped straight through. The traffic is going through several different layers. So it may arrive at a firewall. The firewall has to look at it, check where it's coming from, where it's going. Is there a rule before it passes it on? And when you're dealing with things like video and voice, then time is of the essence. You can't store a packet for 5 milliseconds before you forward it on. So that's another impact.
Now, I don't know about you, but I don't sense that network construction or the management of it is really getting any easier anytime soon.
Well, there's more tools, right? More and more tools, but maybe they're sitting on the shelf, right? Maybe you've got some on the shelf behind you, right? There's I guess people think of network management is really some software, some boxes, some lights flashing, but it's really more about that. It's more about people. It's more about processes and the technology.
Yeah, and certainly new network architectures are impacting it as well, right? I mean, the virtualization craze. I mean, I guess I want to say craze. That's probably the right way to put it. Sometimes I wonder if we're over-virtualizing, right?
Oh yeah, I mean,
You have to wonder.
in the old days, something if it was there, it was there. Now, if it's there, it's also over here. It's there as well, and it can be, and it moves. So with things like the motion software, things can move around dynamically. So no one, a server may fire up and put some storage over there. It'll put an application there, and you kind of got to. How do you keep a control of all that stuff when there's so many changes that you're not, it's automated.
Sometimes I get a kick out of this virtualization discussion because the data center folks think they've got a whole rap on virtualization and we're the top cat, etc. And I got news for you guys. We've been doing virtualization and networks for a long, long time, even back to X25. Oh my God, I really showed my age there, didn't I? But but what I
no, I was going to say, Rich, a VLAN. Anyone heard of a VLAN? They've been around 20 years, right? So
sure.
That's right. So have you heard of this thing called software-defined networks? Rich, you and I, talk about that. But this is something which it's almost like a tsunami coming towards us. No one can kind of hear it, no one can see it, but it's coming. And this whole network virtualization, taking different parts, decoupling the parts of the routers and the switches, and giving them over to software and hardware independently with controllers, it's going to be a nightmare.
The clients that I talk to, Mark, I'd be interested to hear what you hear from your clients. But the clients I hear from, and I think they've got a really good point, is that we're not really 100% sure exactly what software-defined networks will look like,
yeah.
Right? I mean, it still is in a little bit of flux. The standards aren't there yet. There's a lot of discussion that's going around. There's been people that's developed and put in place some software-defined capabilities, but it's not standardized. So actually, what it'll actually do and execute, and then of course you've got all of the different, how do I want to say, the agendas of the various hardware vendors that are further making it more complex by creating capabilities and versions that versions of software capability that don't necessarily line up with what you might be reading or thinking or what have you. That's what I'm finding. Clients have a lot of anxiety over that and what the impact will be on.
Well, there's a threat from operations. There's also a threat from security, because now where the box used to be hardened down, suddenly you're opening it up. So how do you deal with that? And again, it's not, so let's take an example. Like we talked about quality service a few minutes ago. So it could be that the company is going to do a broadcast, right? So they want to send out a message to all the employees around the world. So they trigger off some software-defined networking that reprograms the network, that makes all the the broadcast is going to work really nicely, and that happens with a touch of a button, and then afterwards it all collapses back to the as is, to the previous state. But also after with software-defined networking, they're looking at applications can also make decisions around the quality service. So you've got all these fingers in the pie. It used to be change control was quite strict. It's going to be a nightmare, Rich, and I think people really need to take control of where they are today and think about where they're going. And SDN is a threat, it's an opportunity, but it's going to be exciting, right? So,
yeah, I know we're talking all about complexity, but you're right, there's a lot of excitement to it. But the one more thing that I've just seen on the software-defined networking pieces, and it can't, it's tough to escape, which is that if we get a separation of the control plane and the data plane, and the client's not big enough to maintain their own cloud control of their network environment, the minute you have to outsource that piece, well, who's going to manage it too? Well, obviously the same organization. It's going to be very difficult to separate those two. So I think there'll be a change in operating model that will also impact clients that relate from the software-defined networks.
And take that another step, next generation wide area networking. So again, in the old days, we maybe have a fixed network, fixed circuits, and today MPLS, which gives you guaranteed service, guaranteed points, guaranteed security. But as we move into next gen WAN, so there's you have your MPLS on one hand, but clients don't really want to put all their traffic onto an MPLS network that may be expensive. So if it's email traffic, which is low priority, why are you spending a lot of money pushing that down MPLS? They're going to want to push it down through the internet. But with the internet, there's no quality service, there's no guaranteed delivery, and you've got two options for where the traffic's going to go, right? So again, it brings another burden to network management.
Yeah, so again, what I'm seeing a lot in a lot of my customers, and again, I wonder if you're seeing the same thing, that they're not only concerned, oh my goodness, look what the complexity is now and where things are, and oh my God, it's not getting any better. What do I do? They're battling to balance two things together. They're battling to, number one, maintain a solid operational support model where they deliver what the business needs in managing and operating the network, and at the same time to also then strategically architect the network, and financially architect things so that they give the business the additional capabilities and the functions that they need. Now that's what I see on my side. Do you see some similar things?
Oh, absolutely, Rich. I think in both North America and in Europe, there's a high dependency on. Oh, there's Celine. She just popped off, which is okay. So there's definitely a dependency on those things, and also telecom expense management, right? So where you have multiple circuits and you may be looking to manage those in a better way, you also need to think about the cost, where you're going to make some cost savings from those circuits and from the management of those circuits themselves as well. So, but there's definitely, if you think about North America and Europe, multinational companies, manufacturing in the Far East, research and design somewhere else, virtual teams, collaboration.
Yeah.
Where you may have different times of the day, so you need people to be able to collaborate who are maybe 8 hours apart. And so you need a 24/7 network management operation that can deal not only with less resources, less funds available, but the complexity is increasing, the opportunities are increasing, and it's amazing world.
So a statistic that hit me really as very impactful was a study that one of the resource houses did that showed that 90% of all organizations actually are on the first 2 levels of capability maturity, right? I mean, I think that's amazing when you think about it, right? Because and it's a year-on-year. Yeah, it's a year-on-year study, and the clients, that organizations really haven't been moving up the stack. So if you look at the standard capability maturity model, normally it's a 5-step model, and a lot of different people call each of the steps something different. But at the end of the day, the 5 steps are about the same, no matter whose model it is. So the fact that 90% on those first 2 levels just kind of indicates to you there's got to be some pent-up frustration with the way they're managing the environments, doing too much firefighting, and that's got to be taken away from the strategic side of the business.
And that's where you can stall yourself, because you're spending so much time dealing with the day-to-day operations, like looking at security vulnerabilities, patch management, configuration management, faults that maybe haven't been resolved which keep coming back. And that means that you're not able to spend the time looking at the strategic plan. I'm not looking at the 5-year plan or the 3-year plan. It's like the 2-minute plan, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now I know there's certain things I look for, Mark, when I'm chatting with a client or potential client, for how they're faring. One of the ones that pops right out at me usually is that, and it's a simple question to ask, how you doing with your current management tools, and the percentage of the time that the client has those tools as shelfware on the side, and sometimes, and a lot of times, there's been at least an initial effort to deploy the tool on a machine to get it basically up and running. But you and I both know that it takes a lot more than just throwing it on a machine or a VM and turning it on, right?
And taking that, Rich, the guy, when the software first comes out, maybe some guy's pretty excited about it. He invests some of his own time as well into that tool. Maybe he's got a bit of knowledge as well about that tool. But he's kind of the resident expert on that bit of software. Now, what happens when that guy changes jobs, gets promoted, maybe he moves to a different part of the organization, or even leaves the organization? So that skill level goes with him. So that software very quickly becomes redundant.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a tool without process and people is just it's not worth the money on the tool, sure. And so I find a lot of times too, even if they kind of get the tools working, they use just like an nth of the capability, which is just amazing. I mean, all the capability. So that's what that's some of the things that say a third party could potentially do for you, being capable of executing and utilizing all the capabilities and features that they could provide.
Yeah, I mean, the example that's cited a lot is maybe a word processing software, where the features are very, very rich, or even a spreadsheet software. So the features in there are terrific, but who uses maybe even 20% of the features, right?
Mm.
Because
yeah, but the one thing I would say on that, though, is that sometimes that analogy, it falls a little short only because you say, well, okay, well, I don't use them because I don't need them. Well, you don't use them because you don't know that they exist. And the minute, I can't tell you the number of times, like I particularly love Excel, right? And so I tell people, hey, did you realize you could do this and that? Oh, my God, I didn't know you could do that.
Well, you have people who specialize in, just in that. That's all they do all day, every day. So, and maybe that's an idea, when you look at an outsourcing company, that's something that you can probably benefit from, because you do have these people who specialize in particular areas, and so you get the wealth of their expertise for a fraction of the time, and a fraction of the cost.
Well, that's really the same story, don't you think, with the actual technology itself?
Yeah.
Right? I mean
yeah.
If you look at kind of some of the advanced technologies and some of the advanced capabilities some of the converged products have, you really have to say, okay, well, the vendors are selling and proposing this gear to put into the clients to get some business use and value out of it, these high-end features. But if you can't use them and turn them on, you might as well stuck to the end of life gear, right?
Yeah, I totally agree, Richard. I see that as well. And we get to the point where you've got tools that manage tools and tools that manage tools that manage tools, and there's like a pyramid that builds up, and you end up with maybe 20, 30 different network management tools, and then maybe 10 managers, and then where does it go? It just becomes very, very complex, and you've got to break that apart. You've got to, if it was me, I would really look at how do you break that apart? How do you start? Where do you even how do you know where you are in a maturity level? I think you mentioned it a few minutes ago around maturity modeling. So I think, if you take a step of where you are today and then try and understand where you want to be, and then, what steps are you going to take to get from where you are to where you want to be.
Sure. Now, what do you find like most of your clients complain about? Like, because I hear a lot about just service levels in general, right? Because they're fighting a lot of perception and other options and opportunities that their users might have. So I find that a key thing a lot of my clients complain about is just availability and downtime. Like, these are not improving. These things should be going in the downward direction, but they're not necessarily.
I think the complaints I hear is that there's more and more stuff. There's more and more things to invest in, but there seems to be no return coming from them, because, as you said earlier, things may be deployed physically or logically, but in terms of the functions and features. So one of the reasons they don't do that is time and effort to do that. But also it's because they're worried about security. If I switch this on, what's it going to do, right? So because they haven't had the experience, do you want to be the first person to click the box to say enable this SNMP thing to go off and do something? And there's a fear factor, there's a cost factor, but it does result in declining service levels.
Hey, now, did you read the Network Barometer report, Mark?
I do every year.
Okay, well, good, because since I was involved in writing it, I would be very disappointed if you didn't read it.
Well, if you think, Rich, we've been working together on the data that goes into that. So I think one thing that's very good about it is the broadness, the geographical coverage, the different vendors, the different multinational types of company, whether they're in manufacturing or pharmaceutical or finance, and also the size of the company. So it's a great way to benchmark, I think, Rich. If you take that just as a benchmark, as just for that purpose alone, it's worth its salt.
Well, I bring it up because this year we did something I felt was very interesting and revealed something very important about managing networks, right? Which is that if you take a look at the typical fault causes, the typical root causes of problems that clients report in their network. What's that? Yeah, 85% of the issues were outside of the maintenance provider's remit, and
that's
so
right. Take one of these things. Take a pair of these.
Yeah.
And you got trouble.
Oh, without a doubt. But there's more than that, right? So it could be some of the problems were user error, but some are environmental factors, some power,
Sure.
cooling. It could be misconfiguration. It could be telco issues. But I think the point really is that a good portion of the issues and problems you have in your environment are not going to be repaired. 85% is what we came up with for a number.
Okay.
Are not in the maintenance provider's remit, which means the organization's got to deal with it. That's a high burden. I think.
A burden. That is a high burden. You're right.
Yeah. And so if you're not getting that right, if you're at the low level of maturity, what I'm finding is that clients are actually complaining that costs are going up and not going down.
Yeah.
At least that's what I find this side of the pond.
And stagnant service levels or declining service levels
You're
at the
right.
same time. And of course, every time there's a new application that the business wants to roll out, there's an agility, there's a time to market. If network management isn't there able to keep pace with that, then you're not going to be able to deploy those new services when you want to, right?
Yeah. Now, I've seen another thing, too. I don't know if you've seen this, but certainly with all these as-a-service models, it's making it darn easy for business unit heads to end run the IT department when they're not happy with the service level.
Yeah.
Do you see this happening with your clients? Did they go right to...
Yeah, I mean, I've seen as well. You see companies outsource certain things, and then a little while later insource them again and move them around. But the underlying problem isn't whether you insource or outsource. It's whether you really, you said before, do a maturity model, understand where your strengths are, understand where your weaknesses are, and then get the two to where they want to be, and that puts you in a better shape all around.
If I were a CIO or an IT director, I would be highly uncomfortable with that occurring, and it does occur. Like I say, I have seen it quite often, because at the end of the day, it ends up eroding the influence and success of the IT department and actually the CIO himself, right? I suppose.
Yeah, and as we move more and more to a virtualized environment, I mean, it's interesting right now, isn't it, that in our personal lives, we probably have more tools and whiz-bang gadgets than we do in our business life in many cases. So why is that? Why is IT unable to deploy things as quickly as they want to? One is they haven't got enough people. Two, but they're also looking at the fires and putting the fires out and dealing with businesses day-to-day, not menial operations. That's probably the wrong word, but things that maybe aren't that complex, but certainly take a lot of time. Instead of being more strategic and going to the business and say, what is it you want to do, guys? There's all this stuff you can do with it. Let's back off some of this stuff somewhere else.
Well, that's another interesting one, right? That you just mentioned as well, because how many times have you heard somebody say, "Oh my goodness, I get better performance at home"?
Yeah.
Funny enough, right now I'm on a Verizon FiOS service at home. I get 150 meg up and 150 meg down. I get a great experience here at home.
Well, that's probably double what I'm like, 78 down and about 12 up. So yeah, you've beat me again, Rich.
Yeah. Well, that was the objective, Mark.
You've a pipe this big coming into your building, do you?
Hey, look, there's always been at least a little bit of competition between London and the U.S., right? Well, at least for the last 200 years or so, right?
Oh, yeah. Let's not go there.
No. All right. And another thing kind of related to that, I have users complain a lot about, and I kind of know that there's an issue when they complain that their customers say, oh my goodness, I can go to XYZ organization, your competitor, and I get a better experience than when I come to you.
Yeah. If you summarize that, a little bit, Rich, the reason I think it is because IT departments and network management is seen about fault resolution rather than about agility and providing services going forward.
Right.
Because too much time is spent looking backwards and not looking forwards.
Now that's a good loop around, right? Because again, the key thing, kind of the message with our Google Hangout here is like losing the frustration,
Yeah.
not the control, right? So
Yeah.
so you can lose a lot of this frustration by taking by potentially outsourcing to an M&S provider or what have you.
Yeah.
But then the control bit is that architectural piece that you
It
just
is.
said, right?
That's
Is
right.
building in the capabilities into your
Yeah.
environment that you need to compete effectively. Because at the end of the day, that's what your business wants.
Own the architecture, own the strategic direction, but lose the things which you can lose, which are just taking up your time and not really adding value to the business that you can commoditize. But you need to package those up correctly.
Mark, it's always great talking to you. Always have a good discussion. I'm wondering, Celine and JJ, do we have any comments or questions from the Google Hangout?
We haven't received any questions yet, Rich, but for everybody on the call, if you're watching the recording of this event, please feel free to comment or ask questions on Twitter using hashtag #DDHangouts, and we'll come back to you. Rich, Mark, it was a great session. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. I loved it.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm good. I'm off to have a cup of tea and some sandwiches now. Okay.
Yeah, I suspect that the sandwich I'll have will be quite a bit larger than the one you have.
Well, bon appetit to you both then. Enjoy the rest of the day and chat soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.